Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Online Growth Systems. Today we have a very special guest. We have here Tyler Olson. Tyler is a serial entrepreneur. He has founded more companies than myself, which is saying a lot. Most of the clients, or most of the guests we have on the show they're maybe on their first or second company, but Tyler, you have started 10 companies, is that right?
Yes.
Awesome. So some of them that he's started is called Modern Foundation. That's one of the largest social media agencies, and he himself is a influencer in the social media space. So he goes around and he speaks about it. He's speaking to multiple companies. I don't know if I can say their names.
Yes, you can.
So US Bank is one of them. He's got a couple of speaking gigs aligned even in the future. He's spoke at 3M before. He's a high demand speaker for social media. He had an IT company while he was still in college. Actually, when you were a kid, right?
College, and really I started it when I was about 12.
Right.
And was lightly doing some IT projects through middle school, high school, and I probably had still hundreds of clients over those years. And then I really focused on it full time in college and built it to about 10 people before I graduated.
That's awesome. So you transitioned from IT, you realized there was a big demand, and that's actually what fueled your next venture, which was at the time SMC Pros, which was later rebranded to Modern Foundation, right?
Correct.
So kind of talk about how did you pivot from your first business to your second business? Talk about the supply demand that you saw.
Great question. So we had done projects for hundreds, if not thousands of people, fixing computers. We started to do some website projects, and people started asking us about this Facebook thing. And we already had a presence on Facebook, and we generated a lot of our clients at the time through Facebook, through Twitter. When people would tweet, "I've got a blue screen of death," we'd just respond and say, "Hey, if you can turn your computer back on, we'd love to help you out and see if we can get the computer to work again." And so we generated dozens of clients all around the world through Twitter back in the 2007, 2008 timeframe before it really became big. And I just knew it was a matter of time before businesses woke up and realized that they could make money from these platforms. And so we started a business and raised some capital right away, and we were off to the running. So I sold my IT business about the same time I was starting the new business, and that was a busy and hectic period of life, but it worked out, and now we're 10 years. We just hit our 10th year anniversary with Modern Foundation.
Awesome, congratulations.
Thank you.
So to break the ice a bit for the audience, I want to ask you a question that I know you'll love.
Yes.
So one question that our audience has heard me ask guests before is, this was back in the day I started asking this question when the huge controversy was going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was Captain America and Iron Man in Civil War.
Yes.
Which team are you on?
That's a great question, and I love Marvel. Marvel is so fun, it's so energizing, I think it's a great idea to bring together all these movies and TV shows. And there's Captain America, there's Iron Man, and I'm a Captain America guy, and believe that there's a right in the world. There are rights and wrongs, and it's not always as black and white as we wish it would be. Life is way more complicated than that. But to truly be a hero, and not to pursue being a hero for hero's sake, but because it's what's right in the world. Whereas Iron Man has got the huge ego, and although most entrepreneurs have an ego, there's that balancing act of wanting to not show as much ego as you actually have, and but you got to play that card, and it's fun. Although on the Iron Man side, I'd love to have all the cool tech stuff that he has, and someday I'd love to have a home like his home, and have Jarvis. So maybe we'll make that happen.
Awesome. So let's talk about your earliest entrepreneurial memory. How did you get started? Was it nature or nurture? Did you start out with the itch?
I think for me, it's a combination of both nature and nurture. My dad is an entrepreneur, and I got to see him work in business my whole life and upbringing. I got to see him speak in front of thousands of people, and I always thought, well, isn't that what all dads do? I didn't really have that concept till later in life. It's like, no, that was a big deal that he spoke in front of thousands of people on a frequent basis. And so I had a little bit of that. He started a bunch of businesses in college, and then was in a business for about 30 years that he's still doing about 5 hours a week at this point. And so I had that as an upbringing, but I had that itch as well. And maybe it's part of my DNA from him or just innately. but I always wanted to do my own thing. And I was up at my grandparents' cabin when I was 12 years old, and the family next door said, we need a teenager to fix our computer. It was my first objection. And I had to get over that objection. I said, well, I'm not a teenager yet, but I'm sure I can fix your computer.
Right.
And they said, sure, come on over. And I fixed it up. They said, well, what do we owe you? Well, I'd never been paid before. Well, what do you want? I like brownies. So the first time I got paid as an entrepreneur was in brownies up at the cabin at 12 years old. And the rest is history. I had digital photography business back when nobody had digital cameras. I'd go to Valentine's dances and proms and golf charity tournaments and sell them for $5 each, and I make $500 a night in middle school, which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, heck yeah. Middle school?
Middle school, yep. And actually, my dad and I had basically a lending agreement where I'd rent his printer and I'd rent his camera. I had to pay my dad for the rentals of that, and that was a part of our agreement. I had to pay for my own ink and pay for my own stuff. You know, he helped me with whatever questions I had, but I had to do all of it myself. And then he would help and say, Ty, what do you want me to do? So he worked for me in that. It was good practice.
Wow.
I had a mailbox painting business, a dog walking business. In college, I had a cardboard box business when people needed to move out, where I'd go. I went to Kowalski's down the street and I said, you guys must have cardboard boxes somewhere that are just sitting. They said, yeah, in the dumpster out back. And I said, can I just have them? And they said, sure. And so I borrowed somebody's van because I didn't have a car at the time. I brought 1,000 boxes to campus, put up a little stand in the dorm, and I sold about 1,000 boxes during study exam week.
Yeah.
Made about $3,000, and it was a lot of fun and hilarious. And had an airsoft gun dealing business, which probably wouldn't fly today on campuses.
You were an arms dealer.
I was an arms dealer at St. Thomas, and good memories. I'd give free airsoft guns to all the RAs, so they were on our side. And then, literally everybody had an airsoft gun, and then they all want somebody. They'd feel jealous because other people had different guns, so then they wanted the bigger ones. Right. And it worked out great. Then the dorm next to us wanted to attack us one day, so I secretly sold them airsoft guns so they could raid the building that I was in, and it was a ton of fun. And then I was in a Entrepreneurship 200 class at the University of St. Thomas, and Mike Serafolian, my first entrepreneurship professor, said, Tyler, I think it'd be wise, in that class, we built business plans. That was the whole purpose of 200 at the time. And I built a business plan for the IT business. I decided to focus more on that. By the time the next semester came around, I already had a few part-time people working for me. The following semester, I had my first full-time person and opened an office. And by the time I graduated, I had about 10 people working with me, fixing computers across the Twin Cities. Wow. So there's a long rant, but I love building business. It's one of my favorite things that I do, and helping people think about starting a business is just a lot of fun.
Sure. So let's dial it back to your arms dealing business, because I just have to point out all the correlations that I'm sure you're very aware of.
Yes.
You were an arms dealer, selling to both sides, both dorms. You bribed the government, the RAs. And you were constantly upselling them with a bigger gun.
Yes.
I love that story.
Yes.
You should, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie War Dogs, but it's about two guys that were actual arms dealers in a couple of years ago, and they got caught, and it's about their life story. But if you ever get a movie or a TV show based on you, that will be the best season, I guarantee it. It'll be awesome.
I'll have to check that out. That's awesome.
So let's talk about your IT business. It was called Help Me Ty, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about why you chose to brand it, because your name is Tyler. You want to Help Me Ty. Why did you choose Ty, not Tyler? Why did you want to have your name in it at all? Talk about why you chose to make a thin separation between personal brand and business brand, and the pros and benefits.
Great question. So I'm a early college student at this point, and actually before Help Me Ty, the business name was Ty the Tech Guy, because I liked Eric the Bike Man. I thought that was a great brand, and it worked really well. They'd figured out how to have lots of locations with Eric the Bike Man. It just kind of had a rhyme and rhythm to it. So first it was Ty the Tech Guy, and due to a technical issue, I actually lost tythetechguy.com. So I had to rebrand. So I was forced to rebrand, and people always used to call my cell phone and say, "Help me, Ty." And I'd go fix their computer. It was just the most common thing that people would say. And I thought, well, let's make this easy for people. Let's just name the business Help Me Ty, because that's what everybody is saying already.
Yeah.
And then as the business grew, I had more people. I had to figure out, how do I overcome that this business can't just be about me? I hadn't really thought that far yet. And so we built a whole superhero named Ty, and a whole animation for that at the time. And so Help Me Ty was that character. And kept growing that and investing in that. And eventually I chose to sell that business. I was lucky enough where a mentor of mine at the time, his name is Shane, he had pulled me aside one day and said, Tyler, if you ever want to start a new business, I would invest in you. And I thought, that's exactly the experience that I want to have. I want to learn how to think like an investor. So yes, I should raise money regardless of how challenging and it'll be to sell a business and start a new one. And so I chose to sell the IT business. That was a whole project. And then I chose to start a new business and went down that path, and that's got a bunch of stories attached to it, and raised some money, had some co-founders, and we've survived 10 years.
That's awesome. And not only have you survived, I believe you're thriving, right?
That's right.
So let's talk about the difference between bootstrapping and fundraising, because you've done both. What is your preferred method now that you've experienced both?
I think there's a time and a place for each. Whenever I start a new business, in the early days I want to bootstrap, spend as little as I can to at least have a feasibility analysis. Is there a market for something like this? So as low cost, low time as possible, how can I prove that people are willing to spend money on something? Then from there, it's okay, let's invest what's needed to really get this to pan out and go. So Help Me Ty started with zero. I had no money when I started Help Me Ty. Modern Foundation started with me being $150,000 in debt. So we raised some money right away. And you can reduce some of your risk by doing the OPM method. You raise other people's money to help spread the risk around, will help create an opportunity for others to make money. And people in the early days can have a huge return on their investment. When we sell Modern Foundation, the initial investors will have a substantial multiple, and we're always trying to grow to make sure that all investors win.
That's awesome. So I know that you're starting some new companies right now, or at least you have been in the process of the last 2 years. You want to kind of touch point for the audience to tell them what you're up to nowadays, because you're no longer a part of the daily operations of Modern Foundation, right?
Correct. Yep. So it was about 18 months ago that I presented a plan to my board to personally exit the business for lots of reasons. On one hand, frankly, doing the same business for 8.5 years and someone who has ADD, not actually, but every entrepreneur has some form of it.
Right. Like fast paced.
I like fast paced.
Yeah.
I just had this inner need and desire and drive to start new businesses. It's how I'm wired.
Yeah.
And so I recognized that I needed to start something new. I also recognized that the business would be worth more after the founder exits. And so there were multiple reasons as we went towards pursuing an exit potentially. We thought that was a good path. One of the things we learned is every business needs to have a visionary. And with my exiting process, we recognized that and decided, this company still needs to have a visionary. So we pursued the path of hiring a CEO, and we have just brought somebody on to be CEO of Modern Foundation. So I've finally been able to fully exit and just be an owner and board member. And then from there, I've been able to start a couple new businesses. I've got an Airbnb management company where we help people who want to earn an additional side income off of whether it's real estate investment properties they have, and or if they have an extra bedroom, or if they're looking to have a second home for the first time. We help them make more money than most people realize is possible by doing short-term rental management for them.
Got it.
And that's working out. I've got a cybersecurity academy that you're obviously very familiar with.
I am.
And we're working and racing towards launching a Kickstarter, which will be in mid-August. August 19th is our current timeline for launch to launch that Kickstarter, and fingers crossed, we raise some money to help us get started with that business.
Sure. So now I want to point out to the audience that you're going down a third route of funding. So you could do debt financing. You've done bootstrapping.
Yes.
And you've done fundraising. Now you're doing crowdsourcing, right? Like crowdfunding. So why are you choosing to go another route when you've experienced the other two already and you've found the pros and cons? Why are you exploring Kickstarter?
Great question. There are a lot of reasons for it. One of the things that Kickstarter is great at is being able to have customers, future clients, prepay you for future services. It's a giant feasibility analysis. If we raise 100 grand, we prove that there's a market for at least 100 grand and likely a lot larger. We'll get an idea of who are these buyers, why are they buying, how much are they willing to spend. We'll learn a lot in a provable concept in a short burst.
Got it.
Assuming we raise a decent amount of money from Kickstarter, we'll be able to call a higher valuation when we actually go and raise money. With Modern Foundation, we raised money before we had our first dollar in revenue. And it was a much lower valuation, but that was okay for me at the time. I was 23 years old. To be able to have much more successful business owners and entrepreneurs financially tied to my success, where they had an incentive to help me.
And help you succeed and help you propel.
Yes. Help skip a lot of steps. I wanted to get there faster. And believe that was the right choice at that time. And now that I've learned something, I believe that if we can have some revenue in a very short amount of time, that will help us have a higher valuation. So when we raise money, we lose less equity, so we can keep a higher percentage long term and continue to go down that funding route. I think both of these businesses will be able to have multiple rounds of funding over time as we grow and scale.
Awesome. That's very cool. So it's partly a financial and finance strategy choice. And just because I know a little bit more than maybe average Joe who's watching, it's also a PR move. Is that unlike some of your other businesses, this one is going to be rolled out at a potentially national scale, right? It's going to be on all 50 states of the US, maybe even in some other countries.
Right.
And having the momentum and the publicity and the marketing and a ton of advocates who are already on board and say, I'm a Shield agent, I'm part of Shield. I committed to this idea. In fact, I've financially backed them.
Yes.
It's getting the momentum you need to go where you want to go.
Yes.
That's awesome. So let's dive a little deeper. So on this show, we've already covered the wide. We want to go deep. So let's wind the clock back to your IT business. So the audience doesn't know this, but I do. So I kind of want to prompt the story, and you can kind of tell them what you learned of what that exit was like for you in the IT business, because some entrepreneurs who are watching this would, they're like, that is my dream, to have an exit, to successfully sell my business and then use the funds to start the next one. That's like the whole mission. They're thinking of the Elon Musk model of you start Zip2 and then you start PayPal and then you start, you buy Tesla and Solar City and SpaceX, you know what I mean? It's just like you keep rolling over the funds from the last acquisition you had when you sold. Kind of tell that story and talk about that.
Yep, that was the plan. And I have learned a lot in my years of being an entrepreneur. And when I sold the IT business, actually one more step back. One of my most valuable learning experiences in entrepreneurship was at St. Thomas in the 370 course with Jay Eben, who taught me about cash flow management and the simple concept of paying bills when they're due versus right when you receive them, and trying to collect money from clients up front or as early as possible versus net 30, which is very common. That simple concept changes the ball game from a cash flow perspective. And at the time when I was a student, I was probably doing about $20,000 a month in revenue, and I implemented these ideas not thinking it would impact us much. But when I paid bills on average about 30 days later, and I received client cash about 30 days earlier, that 60-day switch in cash when I'm $20,000 a month in revenue increased my bank account balance by roughly $40,000 from something near zero. And I didn't understand this at the time. So I went back to class and I said, Jay, hold it. We got to do this class over again. What just happened? I have more money than I've ever seen from this one lesson you taught a month ago, and I don't understand why. Can we go over that again? It was a great classroom experience for all of us.
Yeah.
Now fast forward, after I had that experience, I decided to push the limits even further. I found a way to, at the time, legally pay employees with credit cards to have an additional 45 days without any processing fees. There were some new tech tools that are coming out, so I figured out a way to extend the payment terms and be able to collect money even earlier and have people on monthly recurring plans, whether they used us or not. So I had actually stretched it to like an average of 120 days that I would have money before I'd have to spend it,
Right.
which is astronomical. And so when I went to go sell the business, a business that size you sell for, you don't really sell the entire company typically, you sell its assets. So the phone number rings 20 times a day on average. This database of people buy from us when we call them, when we have time to call them. These are the people that are recurring revenue. So I sold the assets, the team, the brand, all of that. And got some money for that exit. But then I kept the debts. And what I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have the foresight for this, but okay, so if I'm collecting money here and then the inflow stops, but you still have the debt. You still have all of these expenses that keep flowing for 120 or 150 days when we're doing however much we were doing revenue at the time. Ended up, so the amount of money I got at exit and even the follow-on money I got for additional sales with them was far less than the amount of debt that I had over just 4 or 5 months worth of expenses of the company. And so I ended that company with about $150,000 in debt at credit card interest rates.
Yeah. Which was probably north of 20%, right?
Yeah, I think on average it was approaching 25 or 30%.
Right.
And so I had a point in life, a realization where I now had about a $10,000 a month credit card payment with no income because I'd sold the business and I hadn't started paying myself a new income with the new business yet. And learned some painful lessons. I presented to a group of entrepreneurs, I think I have to go bankrupt, and learned some things about how not to go bankrupt, where you have some negotiation leverage at this point. When you're about to go bankrupt, you can negotiate with all these creditors and say, look, either every single one of you agrees to terms that you don't want to agree to, or you're getting zero.
Some money or no money?
Some money. Do you want money or do you want no money? Because those are the two options. So actually every single creditor, I think it was every single one, agreed to a 5-year payment term at 1% interest.
Nice.
And then at that, I don't remember the number offhand, but it was like a $2,000 a month payment. Well,
That's doable.
That's doable. I thought $2,000 a month, I can sell more than that. I can sell my way out of this. And so I was able to do that. 5 years later, had all that debt paid off and didn't have to go bankrupt, which was fortunate.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So for someone who might be watching that thinks they think that they might be in that situation, obviously you already talked about the tactics you used of number one, talk to people who have maybe been there before, talk to your network, talk to your mentors and say, I think I'm in a bad situation. What would you recommend for me to help get me out of this hole that I dug?
Right.
Number two, negotiate. Nothing is ever a hard cost. Nothing is not negotiable, right? People think that this is the way it is. You can't, credit card companies are some of the largest companies in the world. They're billion-dollar corporations. Why would they listen to a little, pissant like me,
Right.
really? But the reality is that everything is negotiable. Right?
Everything at any point. Even if it's already, I'm amazed. I'm doing some negotiating right now in a few different worlds, and I'm amazed that even, after an agreement's been made and there's new leverage that comes into place, to experience negotiation after that, sometimes isn't fun. It doesn't feel fair, but frankly, it's the world we live in. And anything can be negotiated with anybody at any time.
Right. So that brings me to the next question of somebody who's watching. What's one thing that you think you could have done better in that situation that they maybe can learn from and they can do differently?
I mean, there are probably 1,000 learning lessons in all of that. You know, at the time, I had not fully, but I had delegated everything related to finance. So I understood the finances of my businesses less than I realized and less than I should have. Understanding the cash flow game, understanding and really diving into that. My dad's been a frequent advisor for me over the years, and he always recommended that I study tax code. And I thought that sounds terrible and boring.
Yeah.
You know, but you hear in the news today that there's all these tax loopholes for the rich. The reality is those tax loopholes are the law, and anybody can use them. And when you understand them, they're not tax loopholes for the rich as the media and PR loves to talk about it. They are what's been agreed upon by legislators that anybody can use.
No matter what your income.
No matter what, you know, and I'll paraphrase a few concepts, but, you know, anything that has the potential to make money someday is legally expensable or deductible, or some, you know, talk to your tax accountant that it's not legal advice, that's not tax advice. But, because I'm neither of those things, I'm not a lawyer nor a tax accountant, I have to say that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's close to how it works. And so I expense a lot of things in life that have the potential to make money someday, and that works.
Sure. And actually kind of tying it back to a business you're running right now with your Airbnb management company, you can use things like a sofa and a TV as potential tax write-offs, because if you used your home as an Airbnb, am I right on this?
Yes. Yeah.
That's very cool. So
Yes, there's a lot more write-offs with an Airbnb business. You know, you can write off a lot of things that you want for yourself, but will add to the interior design of the experiences for those who might stay with you. You know, you can expense your cell phone if you use your cell phone to call people for that business. You can expense mileage for, you know, there's a lot of different rules around it, but I expense a good percentage of the miles on all my vehicles. And, you know, when I do speaking engagements frequently, and I get paid for those. When I bought an Oculus Rift, the VR system from that Facebook came out with, it was, you know, a $1,000 system or thereabouts. But I can expense that because I speak about the future of technology, and I've actually brought my Oculus Rift to speaking engagements and let people use it, those who haven't experienced that before. You know, so that's a legitimate business expense.
Right. Because it not only is a cost for your business, but it also gives you knowledge, credibility, experience that can help you generate revenue.
Absolutely.
Because then you can actually have an authority on that topic. It's hard to speak about Oculus Rift when you've never put one on.
Right.
Right.
Yep. For the Airbnb business, another great example is when I travel, I never stay in hotels anymore. I always stay in Airbnbs, which technically is research and development, right? It's R&D.
Right.
Because
You're studying the competition.
Yes, and studying ideas and methodologies and processes of other companies, other people, to help build ideas into our business.
Right.
And so when I travel, I'm mindful and thoughtful of which Airbnbs do I stay at and why, because I want to learn something from every one, and then I can expense those.
The story you just said actually reminds me of one of my favorite stories from Sam Walton, who is the founder of Walmart, right? And when he was like, gosh, I can't remember, he was above 60, right? He was like an older guy. He was arrested in Brazil. He was crawling around on all fours in a local grocery store with a measuring tape. And they thought he was some crazy American, so the Brazilian cops threw him in jail. And what he was doing is he was measuring the distance between the aisles at the grocery store in Brazil because he thought that they knew something he didn't.
Interesting.
And he was already a billionaire at that point.
Yeah.
So to the point where a billionaire is crawling around on all fours in a grocery store in Brazil measuring the distance. Talk about R&D and talk about humility of like there's always something to learn. I mean, if Sam Walton's doing it, I think every human being should be doing it.
Yes, that's a great example of the kinds of things that you have to think about as an entrepreneur. When you think outside the box, when Sam Walton's a billionaire, to be measuring the aisle distance. You know, for those who haven't seen that McDonald's documentary, I forget what the name of it is. Do you know that, friend? Founder?
Yep.
That's incredible to you know, they took a parking lot and had tape to...
I think they chalked it out.
They chalked it out.
Yeah.
You know, so super bootstrapped, right?
Yeah.
They chalked out different potential floor plans and timed it to see what would be the most efficient use of people's time and how you
Pretended to work with the counters and stopwatch and
Does your hand do this or does it do that? You know, every movement was studied meticulously. And that is what made McDonald's extraordinarily successful over the years. And yeah, I do things like that where I want to study competitors in different ways than many others might think about. You know, right now we're hiring for Shield, the Cybersecurity Academy. We're going to hire a marketing agency, not even my own, that exclusively focuses in Kickstarter. To be able to learn from them. What do they do differently? They're the #1 in the world at Kickstarter. Some of their learning lessons and processes potentially might help Modern Foundation. And to be able to give that to them and say, here's what I've learned that seems awesome. I'm no longer CEO, so I don't make those changes, but...
Here are my recommendations of what I learned working with an agency that's in a market that we haven't fully exploited yet. You know, here's the R&D that I got. See what we can do. Right. Let's talk about scalability. Talking about McDonald's and how this arm movement versus this could potentially save 1/10 of a second. And they were doing that when they had 0 employees, right? 1/10 of a second might not seem like a lot when you have 5 employees. And you let's say that you save 5 seconds a day throughout that process. But 5 seconds a day, 365 days a year, now you're talking about, we saved $100 an hour, or $100 worth of payroll the entire year through that arm movement. Well, now you have 1 million locations. Now you're talking about $100 million. If each location saving $100 a year in that simple arm movement, and there's 1 million locations, $100 million saved by doing this. Talk about scalability. Let's dive into that because I know that you yourself have some experience with scalability. A lot of people, most small businesses are solopreneurs. They are the owner operator. They are a one-man show, a one-woman show, and they work so much in their business that they never remove themselves to work on their business. And I preach that a lot. So I want you to touch on the people who are stuck. They're it's a husband, wife, a person who's doing it by themselves, or maybe they, thank God, they've had 2 or 3 employees. How do they get past that ceiling that seems to be holding them down? How do they scale?
It's hard, and I've been there. It's so, it's painful, and you feel that you have to work all those hours and work the late nights, and maybe you're at a point in the business where that's just what it takes to run it. One of the things that helped me was I joined this program called EO Accelerator. EO stands for the Entrepreneurs Organization. It's one of the best investments of time, money I've ever made in my life. Would recommend it to anybody who's got a business. And one of the requirements in Accelerator is that there are 4 days a year, once a quarter, where everyone is required to be together to help each other learn how to work on the business, not in the business. You're not allowed to touch your cell phone. You're not allowed to touch email. And I remember thinking at the time, and every Accelerator member asks me this when I talk to them about Accelerator, they go, how on earth can I be away from my email and my phone for a day? I can't do that. It is a great first test because doing that is the only way for your business to actually grow, to be able to figure out a way so somebody else answers the phone that day.
Yep.
Or realistically, there are very few issues in life where if you don't respond today or within the next couple hours, the world's going to fall apart.
Right.
As an entrepreneur, we typically feel like it's going to.
Right.
We might lose a client. They expect this level of service. There's a lot of expectation management around all that.
Yep.
But for me, in an IT business, which is always a red fire, someone's calling. I mean, for me, one of the things that I did was my cell phone was our primary business phone number at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It would ring on average 20 times a day at this point. I got to hate calls and voicemails. And so one day I had this idea. This phone that rings 20 times a day, that's my personal cell phone. And I went to my office manager. I said, this phone number I've had for 10 years of my life is now your phone. And I delegated just that one thing. And I said, I'm going to get a new phone and only like 10 people are going to know it. And you're one of them. And, my dentist is going to call. My grandma is going to call. All of our clients are going to call. You're going to get calls on everything. I just want you to figure out how to handle that the best that you can. And that one thing would save me hours a day of being the primary point person.
Yep.
And allowed me to take a quarter off to focus on the business to how to get it to grow. Mm-hmm. There's a long story, but.
No, so you handed your phone once a quarter during those EO days, the Accelerator, where you had to be there. You thought, well, if I can't touch my cell phone, I might as well not even bring it. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, if there is an urgent thing that needs to happen, I'm going to give this to my GM, and they can answer the phones, they can handle the client, so that we're still keeping up our quality of service, our speed of delivery.
Yes.
And that's talking about the first step towards scalability, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like the first step towards going on a diet is don't eat that donut.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Just that donut.
Yes.
If you can do that, step one, right?
Yes.
Rip off the Band-Aid.
Right.
And then you can do, well, if I can do it today, why not tomorrow?
Right.
Why don't we just say, well, let's see what it's like for the whole week. I'm going to go on vacation. You keep the cell phone, right? I'm going to bring this little travel phone.
It's a great example because Dick offered me a donut this morning and I said no.
That's right.
And, there are decisions like that are hard. But when you make those tough decisions, and it could be as simple as, do you have that donut or not? Mm-hmm. Then the next time somebody offers donut or dessert or whatever, it's easier to keep saying no, and then all of a sudden you lose 30 pounds, and you go, what just happened?
I just said no to donuts.
Right. For me, it's both the donuts. I used to have dessert for every meal. Mm-hmm. And when I would drink, I always had mixed drinks. So I'd have a Captain Coke or a Jameson 7. And for whatever reason, my body doesn't handle pop soda very well. And the point that I stopped those two things, I lost 50 pounds in about 2 years.
Holy crap. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I didn't work out anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little bit more. I think I started yoga about then.
Yeah.
But stopping desserts, stopping drinking, and I went on a couple short stints of a diet. But over 2 years, I lost 50 pounds.
Wow. There's a mentor of mine on his desk at his office. He keeps a fresh bag of Doritos that he swaps out once a week because he loves Doritos. And he keeps them there just to taunt him. Mm-hmm. Because if he says, if I can say no to that delicious bag of salty goodness, then I can do anything.
Right.
So he uses it for motivation.
Entrepreneurship requires an incredible level of self-control.
Discipline.
Yeah. The amount of times when an employee will say something to you that extraordinarily upsets you, and you have to have that straight face. To have the self-control of your body and how you respond and take that second is hard and is really important.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that they feel comfortable giving you the bad news, because you have to know the bad news in order to react to it appropriately.
Right, to fix the problem.
And there are time periods. Right now I'm at a point in life where I need to be working 80 hours a week again. And I'm really enjoying that. But for a while I was working a lot less than that.
Right.
But I'm excited to dive back in. And for a lot of people, 80 hours a week sounds like a lot. For me, anything less than 60, I feel like I'm not working.
Yeah, right. You're like, oh man, I'm so unproductive. I haven't
Right.
done anything this week. Yeah.
Yep, 80 starts to push, because that's an average of 12 hours a day for 7 days a week to get to 80. That starts to become a lot. But at 50 or 60, I feel like I'm, like 40 for sure, I feel like I'm not working. And 50 to 60 feels about normal. And then when in time periods, you got to work to 80.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because a lot of people think, myself included, who are constantly saying work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
Now I know that you do both. You work smart and you work hard, which is a deadly combination for success, right? Like, I mean, in a good sense, deadly, right? Let's talk about how you utilize those hours, because I know that you have methodologies and tools, actual tools, software that you use to make sure that, because you're running 3 or 4 different companies at a time, 2 of them taking up a lot of time, and then you're still involved with a couple others. How are you managing a plate that massive when you only have so many hours a day and you need X amount of hours of sleep to survive? Right? And for the people who don't know you, you live an awesome lifestyle outside of work, constantly traveling. And it's not always just for speaking. You go on trips all the time, right? We'll include some B-roll here of videos of you kayaking and skydiving and you name it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you have, first question, how do you have a work-life balance? Second question, what are the tools and tactics and mindsets you use to make sure that the 80 hours are actually producing like 180 hours of actual results?
Great question. There's actually several questions there, and I'll try to address all of them, but it's really hard. And it's something that's taking all my life to build so far, and I expect to improve a lot in the coming years. I got introduced to a system called, or a tool called Trello about probably 5 years ago now. And Trello has positively impacted my life, and there's other project management tools like Basecamp and Asana. Trello has fit the best for me. I've seen some other entrepreneurs use it, but all of my businesses use Trello to manage the business. And it allows me to have a high level situational awareness, and I train teams on how to use it. I combine that with the methodology from the Traction book, EOS, out of Traction. So all my businesses are traction based. So I run level 10s every week with the leaders of the companies, and where I can then provide my level of impact where I need to impact, and I can predict which companies are going to have what kinds of issues at what time and forecast that. We've got scorecards, we've got documented processes, we have issue resolution time. It's a really efficient use of time. When people are in meetings with me when I'm running a level 10, most people, when they're new to that experience, say it's some of the most effective meetings they've ever been in. Most of the world just has super inefficient meetings that people hate. And level 10s out of the Traction philosophy work well. So the combination of Traction and Trello as a system to manage all of that, as well as everything in my personal life. My girlfriend and I have a Trello board for the 2 of us. And every week we've got questions we need to ask each other or issues on anything related to our relationship.
And that can range from date ideas to how to have a healthier relationship, right?
Yes. And instead of, coming home from work and her asking me a really emotionally challenging question at that moment, I might not be in an emotional state ready for handling that question well. Whereas every Sunday morning, we have breakfast together, and I usually make breakfast, and then we have about an hour and a half together. We ask questions, we decide on big questions, and we're mentally prepped. This is our time, it's blocked off every week, nobody's allowed to touch it, and that's for us to go on a date with each other to talk about how can we make our relationship stronger.
That's
and
awesome.
It's incredibly valuable. Some relationships go, that sounds too much like work. But frankly, it works. And people who do it feel like they have a much healthier relationship with their significant other. So those are a few things that work well.
Well, it's just like a business partner. Imagine the level of communication you have to have with a business partner. Now imagine your home life. That's your life. That's your partner in life, your partner in crime, right? You should have, if not the same amount of communication with your business partner, more, right? Because a business is temporary.
Right.
You can sell, you can get acquired, you can grow, you can exit, right? You can step down as CEO like you did with Modern.
Yep.
But partners are more potentially long-term, right? Business partners can go like that. They can just up and say, you know, I'm bored, right? I want to do something else. No hard feelings, right? So I think that's a mentor of mine actually does a similar thing. They have quarterly meetings where him and his wife take an entire day and they look at their family because they've got a couple of kids and they have like almost like their own trip, like a Kanban board.
Yes.
And they say, here's where our goals were for the kids. Here's where our relationship goals were for each other. And one of them is like, we want to have X amount of date nights a year. How are we on track? Are we hitting those, right? Because realistically, we know that we feel better about ourselves and our relationship together when we go out on dates. It's just fundamentally part of having a healthy relationship for them, right? So if they hit those goals, they are happier. And it might sound like unsexy, like that just is a huge turn off for me. Like, right, going to a meeting with them, like talking about goals. The best couples are referred to as power couples, right? Power couples frequently practice something similar to that. So that's a great tidbit on a personal life. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. The healthiest relationships, whether it's work, personal, family, if they have something like that, they have the healthiest relationships that go the furthest in life.
And I want to touch on that on parents and kid relationships too, right? This isn't necessarily relevant, but it's just an idea that I had that I had a really healthy relationship with my mom growing up and my dad too. So if I ever had questions about life, I knew that they were extremely accessible, that I could just ask them and we could dive extremely deep into like the wee hours of the morning. My mom would be folding laundry, and I would just like spew the questions of the world, you know, like why, you know, and she would tell me, right? And a lot of people who don't necessarily have good relationships with their parents, or they feel like they're missing something growing up, it's because they didn't have those kinds of conversations. And frequently, you don't have those conversations because you don't have the accessibility to do it, right? Maybe your kid is shy. Maybe the adult is shy, right? So having time set aside, not that it forces you, but it creates opportunity to have those deep conversations and to grow in relationship, to grow your business, whatever it is, whatever piece of your life that you're talking about, whether it's your partner, your parents, your kids, your business partner, your employees. Having that time set aside for me, every Saturday morning, I have back-to-back Zoom calls with each of the people that I manage, and I say, how's it going? Let's check, because I use Trello too, right? How's it going? Let's check everything. What's in progress? What's being held up? And how can I help you? What are your roadblocks? My job, a lot of CEOs say that their job is to be the fireman. They put out fires. I consider myself a demolition worker, right? What roadblocks are in your way so I can obliterate them and you can continue to propel forward, right? So that way they can be the construction crew and I'm the demo crew, right? So I love that analogy and those pinpoints. So let's talk about one last topic of what is a call to action that you have for the audience. Where can they follow you? What are you going on right now? What is something? How can they engage with you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dick, for having me on the show today. And this is a lot of fun, and I love helping entrepreneurs. And so opportunities like this, I frequently say yes to. It's rare that I say no to helping entrepreneurs. And right now I've got Cybersecurity Academy that is about to launch. If you're watching this show, August of 2019, you probably could go check out our Kickstarter, Shield, SHYLD. Or shield.academy will be the domain name. Away Agents is the name of the Airbnb business. You can go to awayagents.com. And if you're looking to make more money off of an Airbnb business idea that you've always thought about, we got some consulting as a part of that as well that we can do. I've been active in Turo. So you can tweet me at Ty Olson. It's TYOLSON. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler M. Olson. You can find me on Facebook, Tyler Olson. And, I've got tylerolson.net, which is the kind of conglomeration of all of that. So
Right.
Any of those places, feel free to reach out. You'll find email addresses for me and rock and roll from there.
Awesome. Rapid fire question session as we wrap up.
Yeah.
Best resource you've ever consumed? Whether it's a movie, book, quote you read, go.
Great question. It's hard to stop at one, but
You can give me a list of top 3.
sure. So the Traction book I referenced earlier,
Who's the author there?
Gino Wickman,
Got it?
and that book has transformed my life. And most entrepreneurs who have read it and applied it would say something similar to that. It becomes the operating system of our lives, of our businesses. Some people call it the Bible of the business because it's the answer to all of the hardest questions. And it's really, really impactful. Secondly would be the Entrepreneurs Organization, so EO. It's one of the world's largest and most influential organizations for entrepreneurs. The Accelerator Program, the small business category, starts when you get to about $250,000 in revenue. It's designed to help you go from $250,000 to $1 million as fast as possible. And then when you graduate, if you're a founder or majority owner of a business doing more than $1 million, you can be an EO. Easily the most valuable time and money I've ever invested in my life. Nothing comes close to second to EO. And I think Accelerator is like $1,700 a year, thereabouts. I think EO is about $4,500 a year. Sounds like a lot for an association, but
The return on investment is, I bet, unparalleled.
unparalleled.
Awesome. What is one movie you recommend or show you recommend entrepreneurs watching, whether it's for motivation, inspiration, or ideation?
It's a great question. We talked about Founder earlier. That one is really fascinating from thinking about entrepreneurship differently and where it can come from and where it can go. It helps think outside the box. What is the movie with, there's a documentary on Netflix about venture capital, and it talks about the history of venture capital. And it's also really interesting. So it talks about Intel and Silicon Valley, kind of the early days of venture capital, when it first became a concept that people theorized,
Right.
and where it's gone from there. A lot of good entrepreneurship lessons in that book. There's a lot of different
Sure.
movies. And
Well, we will include all the resources that Tyler has talked about in the show notes. You can check it out in the description below, depending on what platform you're listening or watching this to. Or you can go to onlinegrowthsystems.com/show notes, and you will find links to Trello, EO, the Traction book, all the movies that he's mentioned, and of course, all of Tyler's resources that you can contact him on. There's a copy of the transcription if you want to read it. And there's also some highlights of what I would consider the gold nuggets from the show. We always include those as well. So, Tyler, we want to thank you for being on the show, and we look forward to having you on again in the future. We should touch base in 5 years and see where these businesses are going, and if you're starting something new, and talk about it from there.
sounds like fun. Well, thanks for investing some time with us today, and thanks, Dick, for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
Thanks.
I come from a town where most of the people are so close-minded. They go into school and they work in a job, but they don't even like it. I won't be put in a box. Nobody telling me what I should rock. Nobody telling me what I should drop. Cause I do what I want and just know I don't stop. Recording till 4 in the morning, they snoring. I'm pouring my soul into every story I'm writing, producing. I mix it, I master, I'm building my craft, and I'm not looking back. I've been going to